In the center of the hallway stood a formidable crimson suitcase, gleaming with metallic clasps, sturdy straps, and a heavy handle, like an uninvited guest. The moment Fannis stepped through the door, his eyes met it, and he let out a questioning sound, full of bewilderment. A long time ago, Ada had acquired this leather giant at a sale, as if anticipating some future need. She was seemingly a sensible and practical woman, yet at times her actions were baffling. Take this suitcase, for instance, a useless expense. They never left their hometown, except for visits to Urmanovo village, where Fannis's paternal aunt, a woman of enviable longevity, was living out her days. His father had passed away many years ago. The aunt, Medina, was his cousin. Fannis's mother insisted on regular trips to Urmanovo, calling it keeping an eye on the situation. The aunt had no other relatives, the house was sturdy, and Urmanovo itself wasn't far from the city. In short, there was plenty to keep an eye on. Naturally, the suitcase was never used for these trips to oversee the aunt's property. So this unnecessary trunk languished in the attic, where Aida stored various fabrics. "Adik!" Fannis called out loudly, taking off his shoes and hanging up his baseball cap. Grabbing his slippers from the shelf, he glanced at himself in the mirror. The reflection showed a round-faced, stout man with a short haircut. Plaid shorts and a bright yellow t-shirt looked somewhat comical on his stocky frame, but Fannis wasn't bothered. What else was there to wear in such heat? "Why did you take out the suitcase?" Silence was the only answer. From deeper within the apartment came the faint sound of the shower. He could hear the characteristic gurgle of water pouring from a wide nozzle onto the acrylic tray. She decided to take a shower, Fannis thought. And why suddenly in the middle of the day? He peered into the room, then headed to the kitchen. Everything was in its place, almost sterile clean. Every item was precisely where it belonged. It was immediately obvious that his wife worked as a senior nurse in surgery. Her passion for cleanliness is her occupational hazard, Fannis often said. Today was her day off. She must have cooked something delicious. She was an excellent cook. Fannis smacked his lips in anticipation, walked to the stove, and peered into a large green pot with a transparent lid. Empty. Just in case, he opened the oven. Nothing there either, and no smell of food. The water stopped running, and a couple of minutes later, Ada emerged from the bathroom. She wore a light sundress with a full skirt that fell below her knees. Such romantic feminine styles particularly suited her. She flicked a light switch, turned, and saw Fannis. Moving her right leg with difficulty, she walked into the kitchen and said, "Hello?" Why did she take out the suitcase? "And there's no food?" he wanted to ask, but for some reason he remained silent. There was something unfamiliar, alien, about her appearance. Fannis didn't know how to act with this new woman. She seemed the same. Thick, slightly curly dark hair gathered at the nape of her neck in a voluminous ponytail, an open forehead, large brown eyes. Her face was delicate, as if drawn with ink on a sheet of white paper. She was a beautiful woman. Everyone who saw her in photographs admired her, but in person they would look away, pitying either her or Fannis. Her beauty had a touch of sorrow. As long as his wife was standing or sitting, nothing was noticeable. Tastefully chosen clothes accentuated her figure. But the moment she took a step, Ada was disabled. She had limped since birth. Her gait was awkward, with a twist. It was both pitiable and embarrassing to watch her move her legs. But Fannis had grown accustomed to it. Yes, there was a defect, of course. but she was an excellent housekeeper, and her character was good, compliant, and calm. Even his mother had recently started saying more often, "You can live with Ada." In a way, it was even good that she limped, less pride, less attitude. Another woman, you say one word, and she throws 10 back. You'd wear your tongue to the bone arguing with them. But this one was silent, never argued. His wife sat on a stool by the door. As usual, she smelled of something delicate, perhaps lilac, perhaps peonies. Fannis knew it was her favorite perfume, but he had never bothered to ask its name. Ada sat silently, gazing at her husband. Fannis felt himself sweating even more. Trickles of sweat ran down his back. The balcony doors and windows were open, but the sticky heat clung to his body, forcing his pores to release moisture. "Adik, what's wrong? Why the suitcase? What happened?" he asked hoarsely. He needed to ask, but he didn't want to hear the answer. He probably already knew everything, though he didn't yet understand what he knew. "My things are in the suitcase. I'm leaving you, Fannis," Ada said quietly, her thoughtful gaze never leaving him. "What happened?" he repeated automatically. Inside, everything seemed to stop. A click, and everything shut down. She remained silent. She had already said what she needed to say. "What do you mean? Where? Why?" Fannis stammered, regaining his senses, unable to comprehend how they could suddenly be discussing this. What would happen next? Ada lowered her gaze, sighed almost imperceptibly, then looked clearly and directly at her husband and said, "Another person has appeared in my life, and I intend to go with him. Forgive me." Unbelievable! Stupor, confusion, and extreme astonishment were replaced by oppressive resentment. Is it that easy for you? You shamelessly tell your husband about your lover. She, you see, has some person. And am I not a person, in your opinion? Please calm down and don't raise your voice, Ada interrupted him. Fannis fell silent in confusion. He clearly saw that his wife felt no remorse for her infidelity, for this blatant treachery. "Before you shower me with reproaches, listen. There is no lover. You can rest assured. No one is pointing fingers or whispering behind your back, calling you a cuckold. In all our years of marriage, I have never cheated on you, although I knew about your escapades with Tanya Malova." Fannis was speechless from surprise, his face flushed as if doused with boiling water. He had been convinced that Ada suspected nothing, and thus the blow was particularly painful. 2 years ago, he had indeed had a fleeting office romance, a light fling. Tatochka, as everyone called her, also treated their liaison as a pleasant diversion. She had an easygoing nature. They met for only a few months, then broke up painlessly. Now they simply greeted each other in the corridor as if nothing had happened. Fannis knew that after him, the chief engineer had been in Tatochka's bed, and now she was dating the head of the finance department. In short, she was a flighty girl. "Ada, Fannis began, but she interrupted his attempts to justify himself with a tired gesture. "Leave it. It's not worth it." "No, it is necessary," he unexpectedly stubbornly objected. "It is necessary." Fannis was nervous and couldn't control himself. How dare she act so calmly? Where did she get those smooth gestures and that unperturbed gaze? She should be hysterical, crying, looking guilty, head down. But instead she sat with a regal air, looking at him like an annoying fly. Fannis paced the kitchen, approached the stove again, aimlessly peered into the empty pot, slammed the lid shut with a clang, crossed his arms over his chest, and sat opposite his wife. Suddenly, he realized who she reminded him of. His neighbor Valya Lomakin had a huge painting in a luxurious frame hanging on his wall. He and his wife had traveled abroad and acquired a Madonna and child. Elongated, sorrowful eyes, a high forehead, pale skin, a mournful crease at the mouth, an ethereal, otherworldly face. Not just a face, but an iconic countenance. If it weren't for her limp, she never would have been my wife. This thought suddenly struck Fanis, and he couldn't protect himself from it. "I loved you," he exclaimed. "I always loved you. Even if something happened, well, it happened and it passed. Everyone has their moments. You yourself understood it was trifles. That's why you were silent. Right?" Ada smirked, but didn't answer. "Yes," Fanis said for her, his voice thin and pathetic. "We lived well. I brought everything into the house. I don't drink. I earn enough. I never reproached you. Although, well, you know yourself." "I know," she replied, and again gave her mysterious smirk. A tiny wrinkle appeared between her eyebrows. Last week, they had guests. Fanis's older sister from Yelabuga came with her husband. Late in the evening, Aida quietly went to the dark kitchen. She remembered she had forgotten to put the French-style meat in the refrigerator. Fanis and Rosa were smoking on the balcony, chatting animatedly, and didn't notice her arrival. Hearing her name, Aida froze, with the frying pan in her hands. Rosa was speaking in a soft, sympathetic voice about Fanis's difficult lot. Is it easy for him to constantly catch sidelong glances? A husband should be proud of his wife, not ashamed of her, and they have no children. They've been together so many years, surely it's Aida's fault. And she's not all right as a woman. Fanis remained silent. Aida waited for his answer. Waited as if her whole life depended on it. And Fanis sighed sorrowfully and sadly said that he had to endure, having taken on the responsibility, and that everyone has their cross to bear. He continued to speak in the same vein, but it no longer mattered. Ada silently put the frying pan back on the table and left the kitchen. Fanis noticed nothing. He continued to pace, grabbed a paper napkin from the holder, and began diligently folding it. "See, we lived well." He folded a corner. "You could say everyone envied us. And now you just..." He folded a second corner. "Ruin everything. Maybe you decided to get revenge on me? Yes? To test how I'd react? Yes? Did I guess right?" He waved the folded triangle in Ada's face, crumpled it, and threw it towards the sink. He missed. The paper ball bounced off and fell to the floor. Aida calmly watched his manipulations, slightly raised her eyebrows and replied, "What nonsense. This isn't a test, and I'm not seeking revenge. There's nothing to avenge. I didn't suffer so much that I'd hatch a revenge plan for 2 years and spring it like this." Fanis, as if stunned, asked about the extent of Aida's suffering, though the true meaning of her words had already penetrated his consciousness. He realized it wasn't about vengeance or tests, but he still spewed meaningless phrases, trying to bury the inevitable beneath them, as if words could hide the coming reality. "Okay, granted, but I loved you. I love you." His voice sounded with a childlike naivety that made Fanis uncomfortable. Why was he clinging so desperately to his wife? Suddenly, he wanted to say something biting, angry, hurtful, to provoke a reaction from her, to make her blush, feel embarrassed, nervous, or even cry. But instead, he mumbled confusedly, "If there's no lover, then why?" "There is no lover," Ada confirmed, looking at him with an expression that could be interpreted as both sympathy and annoyance. "There were no touches between us. And we only talked about us once. Yesterday? Yesterday? Unbelievable! And already today she decided to leave me, Fannis exclaimed with feigned malice. You're either incredibly naive, or you're just messing with my head, or I don't understand anything at all. Your misunderstanding changes nothing. Our relationship will no longer exist, she stated flatly. The finality of these words made Fannis go on the offensive again. Such was his nature. The more he was pushed away, the harder he clung. In studies and work, this quality was considered persistence and determination. Who is he, this chosen one of yours? Fannis asked loudly and testily. A doctor, a surgeon from our department, was Aida's laconic reply. Aha, a colleague, so, an office romance, Fannis began, but remembering his own affair with Tatochka, he stopped short. Clearing his throat, he finished, And how long has this been going on? Aida pretended not to notice his confusion. I already explained that nothing started. We worked together for 4 years. Yesterday, he proposed I go with him to Tiumen, where he was offered a position in a clinic, and become his wife. What nerve. And the fact that you're married, that doesn't bother him. He knew about it. That's why he didn't approach me earlier. He said that if he had no hope, he would leave. Aida's face flushed slightly. And here you are, Fannis choked with indignation. After one conversation, like some romantic fool, running after him, imagining yourself a Decembrist's wife. Aida looked at him intently and heavily and said, as if dropping each word, "Don't be like that, Fannis, I beg you. Understand, even if nothing works out between us, I can no longer be with you." "She can't," he suddenly burst out. "But I could. Everyone around me told me about it. Mother warned, don't marry her. Why do you need this sick woman? Many need you, but you pitied her, went against your own mother, and here's the gratitude." Aida grew even paler and froze. Now she'll cry, Fannis thought maliciously, but he was wrong. She didn't shed a tear, merely paused for a few moments, then said, "You're right. Few would marry someone like me. But you know what? Not for a single day did you let me forget your kindness and my defect. You didn't love me, but your own heroic act, your self-sacrifice. You loved it so much that sometimes it became unbearable for me." "How so?" "I pretended it was nothing special." "Exactly, you pretended, but he truly doesn't notice," she interrupted. "It's impossible not to notice something like that," Fannis grumbled. "Why humiliate yourself like that?" Aida said, reproachfully. "Oh, but you at least have risen high." Suddenly, Fannis realized, Aida would leave. Soon, she would disappear from his life forever. Formalities didn't matter, for they weren't married. They had come together, and now they were separating. He understood they would likely never see each other again, and he couldn't bring himself to let her go gracefully. A fear of loneliness and a desire to punish her for this overwhelmed him. He rushed to pour out all the murky sludge that was bubbling inside him. "In fact, if you want to know, I'd been planning to kick you out of here for a long time. I just lacked the conscience. Where would a disabled woman go, I thought. So I endured. Endured. Why do you think I didn't go on vacation with you? And we didn't go anywhere? Because I was ashamed? It's unpleasant to walk down the street when everyone stares and whispers behind your back? This was a lie. They didn't travel or go out because Fannis was always stingy with money. But now it didn't matter. You think this will last between you? Here." He rudely shoved a fig sign made with his thick fingers in her face. Ada flinched, and Fannis felt a perverse relief, seeing fright and pain in her eyes. Let him go to the theater with you just once or somewhere else. Let him try. Then you'll know if he notices anything or not. Let him live with a cripple. After that, he continued to spew bitter, poisonous words for a long time. But he saw that he could no longer hurt Ada. He was like a dog on a short leash, barking, choking on saliva, and lunging forward, suffocating with powerless rage. Perhaps it was frightening, but it was no longer offensive. The realization struck him along with the sound of the door closing. Not demonstratively, with a storm of emotions and fury, but quietly and mundanely, the deadbolt clicked, dividing their lives into before and after. Fannis felt as if words were stuck in his throat, as if everything had dried up there. A sudden phone call made him automatically reach for the receiver, and he said the usual. "Hello, speaking." It was his mother. She reminded him of the need to visit his aunt, and spoke at length about the importance of installing water meters, sharing other, undoubtedly useful advice. Fannis listened patiently, but her words seemed like a distant echo, not penetrating his consciousness. His numb right hand forced him to switch the receiver to his left. "I'm talking to you. Do you hear me? Fannis? Where are you?" His mother's voice broke through the veil of despair. "Ada left," he said, almost soundlessly, unexpectedly giving voice to the thought that had been tormenting him from within, causing a pulsating pain in his head. Having said this, he dropped the receiver, which erupted in shouts and lamentations, onto the glass table. He knew what he would hear from his mother now, for he himself had told her the same thing only recently. Stepping onto the balcony, he leaned heavily on the openwork railing. Maybe jump. The thought was absurd. The apartment was only on the second floor. Most likely he would just break his legs and limp, like Ada. Some kind of mockery, a farce. For the first time, Fannis regretted living so low, so close to the ground. The jump would be too short. There wouldn't be enough time to feel real fear and, in horror, forget the absurdity of the situation, the tragic and meaningless end. His heart wouldn't have time to break, and all this pain would remain inside, a dark burden at the very bottom of his soul. He stood, clutching the railing, gazing intently into the distance. In the courtyard, elderly women sat primly on benches, children played on the playground, swinging on swings, messing in the sandbox, sliding down bright slides. A small boy, in a red Panama hat and short denim shorts, tossed a striped ball, trying to catch it. The disobedient ball slipped from his hands, fell to the ground, and rolled away. The toddler ran after it, caught it, hugged it with his chubby hands, and threw it into the air again. What if Ada and this man, who destroyed their lives, also have children? Fannis suddenly thought, quietly and without malice. His eyes filled with tears, and the world around him blurred into a fog. "Hey, Guy Fannis, what are you doing there? You'll fall," some woman shrieked. Fannis flinched and saw his mother running through the courtyard, waving her arms. She lived nearby and had apparently rushed to help. Her large body swayed, her hair was disheveled, her face was red, her skirt askew. Breathing heavily, she didn't slow down, unwilling to stop. Now she'll run to the entrance, climb the stairs, open the door with her key, and, stomping like an elephant, burst into the room wailing, "I told you so. I knew it would happen." Then she'll rush to the medicine cabinet, frantically rummage through bottles and vials with her ringed fingers. pour herself some sedatives, sit down with a glass in hand, and weep, convincing her son how lucky he was to get rid of that witch in time. "Don't stand there, you'll fall," his mother persisted, and suddenly turned towards the playground. Fannis blinked in surprise and noticed that it wasn't his mother at all. A stout woman ran to the slide, at the top of which stood a toddler in a green Panama hat, and tried to pull him down. The child fought back and screamed, clinging tightly to the railing. Fannis suddenly wanted to scream, to shout at the entire courtyard, at the huge world that didn't care about his ruined life. But he only had strength for a weak wave of his hand. He turned his back on summer, the yard, the sky, the playing children, and disappeared into the empty apartment.